Once being one of the most influential and impactful magazines for new hip-hop artists to get put on, is now seeing a downfall in its latter days. We as fans would be stupid to not acknowledge the impact the magazine has given the industry. With that being said, let's begin with the fall of XXL.
Free big brother slammer, 2019 got caught with a jammer. New bitch, she don't got no manners. She know I been drinking, come fuck with the scammers. Tell Allen how I walk with the hammer.
At the time of the early 2000s, late 90s, the Sourc magazine had a lock on rap print media. They were the go-to magazine for any person that wanted to consume rap media, obtaining covers, interviews, critiques from all of the biggest names in the industry. And the Sourc would eventually become one of XXL's biggest oppositions. The Sourc was started by two white Harvard graduates that came from inner city communities. Over the course of the 80s and 90s, they recruited a great staff of writers who became extremely valued for their opinions and their morals within the hip-hop industry. The part of their brand that was most infamous was their 5-mic grading system, one mic being the worst and 5 mics being flawless. And throughout the 80s and 90s, the Sourc magazine had a large monopoly on the hip-hop media industry. But where the Sourc was valued for their honest critiques of hip-hop music at the time, they would eventually fall off for the exact opposite thing. The downfall starts when the CEO wanted to give Benzino and his group a highlighted piece in the magazine in exchange for money. A lot of the fellow writers of the Sourc denied this piece and wanting nothing to do with it. These writers at the time weren't willing to sacrifice their integrity for money for Benzino. So what would the CEO do? He would go over their head and print the segment regardless. A very large group of writers responded with a petition to get said CEO removed. And this internal conflict sparked the fall of the Sourc. And many of those same exact writers would leave to go help found and produce for their competitor, XXL. Before XXL would become what it is today, they would go through many trials and tribulations in the early days with little to no resources and funding. To compete with the Sourc magazine and others alike, they reached out to Elliot Wilson in 1999. John Schechter would connect Elliot with Dennis Page, one of the CEOs of Harris Publication. They were very fond and intrigued by his independent work with his outlet Ego Trip. They were fascinated with the amount of attention he was able to garner working with the Sourc in such a short period of time. So they took a shot and gave Elliot Wilson his first editor-in-chief job, where Elliot Wilson wanted to make it his sole mission to destroy and take down the Sourc magazine. And the reason Elliot had such a vendetta against the Sourc magazine is because he wrote for them once before, but left because one of the owners changed a grade on one of his reviews. Elliot was someone who very much valued his critiques to the highest extent. He took them very seriously. And when one of the owners changed his review of one of Corrupt's records to 2.5 to a 3.5, as well as another record, Elliot decided that was enough and he had to leave the Sourc magazine because his boss was attempting to ruin the integrity of his own reviews to the fans. And this would not only be the first time the Sourc would get caught doing shady shit like this. At the Sourc Awards, they would have Silta Shaka beat Nori, Pun, DMX, Corrupt, and Cameron. And it was never said directly, but Master P pretty much paid for this award because of all the advertising he was doing with the Sourc magazine. He was calling in to set his own ad, and at one point even paying up to $250,000 for an ad, but more specifically paying $75K on the regular for his artist. Nori would run into Benzino a few years later, still upset about the award, where Benzino indirectly pretty much said that that award was paid for Silta Shaka due to all the advertising his label was doing with the Sourc. Now, joining a publication that probably had a tenth of the funding, a tenth of the resources as the competitor, the Sourc, Elliot had to take a chance at reaching out to artists before the Sourc could get to them. He would reach out to artists way before album drops, and he took a way more aggressive approach in terms of recruiting the artists to work with him. He would pretty much tell artists, yo, you gotta shoot with me. I could get your cover done in 2 days, posted within the next week. Where at the time, covers in the physical magazine industry took way longer. You might shoot for a front cover or a section of a magazine, give an interview piece, and not even see that piece be released for another 3 months. Not only did he undercut his competitors with less resources, he would create full editorials going after his peers in the media space. Before this, you would not see competition amongst media outlets in magazines. There was no beefing between them, where he would write full-on raps going after the Sourc magazine under the alias Yellow N-word. Him writing under a rap alias and him beefing with his peers and musicians as a whole was something very new in the journalist space. And Elliot Wilson would get Benzino riled up to the point where he would have to come up to XXL and get into a verbal altercation that almost turned physical. 50 Cent guest edited the 50th issue of XXL. They debuted a crazy illustration of Benzino that he was not fond of whatsoever. He would go up there screaming at Elliot Wilson and a bunch of other writers on the staff. And readers of the columns and hip-hop fans themselves loved this energy and confidence coming from Elliot Wilson. Given this approach, within just 5 years, by 2004, XXL was selling just as many copies as the Sourc magazine. Elliot and the magazine were some of the first people known to give 50 Cent coverage before ever getting signed, going to his hood to get interviews, to get coverage, to listen to albums before they would even drop. In the come up of 50 Cent, they were very much known for documenting every step of that process. But there was one issue when 50 Cent would go to sign with Eminem. The original editors of XXL before Elliot Wilson arrived were not fond of Eminem being a huge white MC dominating the space. A huge portion of the staff were highly critical of Eminem. In one of the very first editions Elliot was a part of, they released a very insensitive cartoon of Eminem's mom spanking him, where Eminem infamously raps about looking at a XXL magazine and finding this crazy image. So off rip, the relations between XXL and Eminem were on very thin ice. And around the time 50 signed with Eminem, XXL was looking to get another cover with 50. Paul Rosenberg would help align a meeting between all of them: Eminem, 50 Cent, Elliot Wilson, and a bunch of other members from each of their respective sides, where they would come to a conclusion that 50 Cent would not do another cover unless the next one would include Eminem, 50 Cent, and Dr. Dre. And it's ironic that that would be the first issue that ever outsold the Sourc magazine. Meanwhile, the Sourc and Benzino are trying to go to war with Eminem. And by this point, the Sourc magazine had pretty much completely sold out. They were starting to bite off the style that Elliot Wilson had introduced at XXL and released a cover of Benzino decapitating Eminem. And in this column, Benzino would attempt to expose Eminem with some bars from his high school days, which were very racially insensitive, with him calling his then black girlfriend the N-word with the ER. And this was pretty much Benzino and the Source's last attempt at trying to make their brand relevant once again. And a lot of hip-hop fans saw the optics of this situation as a whole. Eminem being at a way different point in his life when he made these bars, these lyrics. He would full-fledged take accountability and apologize to his fans. I'd say about 99% of his fans were forgiving. Before this, the Source's integrity was very much at stake, but this was the last straw for most of hip-hop fans, and really seemed like the passing of the torch from the Sourc magazine to XXL. Elliot Wilson is also the man responsible for creating and launching their website in 2005. A flawless transition from physical print media into the internet blog era that XXL absolutely capitalized on in the early stages. In another moment I feel he's not credited for, and we will talk about later down the road, is introducing a version of the Freshman list 6 years before it even got an official copy, where in this style of column they would try to put you on to 7 different new artists that you did not hear before, and they were predicting to blow up very soon. At its peak, the XXL Freshman list was a pivotal achievement for future stars, trusted critique of what was next to get huge. And we've seen some of the most influential artists be featured on the XXL Freshman list before they even release a viral song. The purpose of the list itself was to aim to predict and put on the future big stars while still at an underground level. The series itself was really the first of its kind. Before that, it wasn't really beneficial to cover an artist that wouldn't give your magazine or internet blog clicks. Like, why would you talk about somebody nobody wants to hear? But XXL took a risk at going out to devote a section of their magazine strictly for underground artists. So in 2007, the very first edition of the XXL Freshman list, we had Boosie, Plies, Lupe Fiasco, and Papoose. The list obviously looking a lot different than it does now. They only did 4 initial artists in the first trial run. But in the very first year they launched this series, They hit it right on the head, which is why I have the 2007 slot in 8th place on the list. Lil Boosie then, just Boosie now, is clearly one of the most viral superstars to come from the list as a whole. I mean, 17 years later, he's still one of the most talked about superstars in the hip-hop industry. And with the selection of Lupe Fiasco, he's one of the most nuanced and in-depth lyrical artists that we've seen in the past 20 to 30 years. And there's tracks throughout his discography that people are still spinning to this day and are regarded as top tracks amongst hip-hop peers. And with the selection of Plies and Papoose, they were two artists that the rest of the industry refused to talk about, but XXL would still promote regardless. Plies to this day still has a cult following of fans in Florida that still ride for it. So with its first edition, I feel XXL did a great fucking job. And their balls to talk about and promote these artists that weren't really receiving the same amount of love in other media spaces attracted a lot of viewers to the series itself. Now, the XXL did skip a year and did not have an edition for 2008, but they reinstated it back in 2009. Overall, I feel like this was the most balanced list that XXL has ever released throughout their magazine discography. Chief Keef, Travis, Schoolboy Q, Joey Badass, Action, Logic, and Ab-Soul obviously being the biggest artists to come out of this class. Not only does this class lean way more towards my personal music taste, but quality-wise, this class is responsible for hundreds of high-quality hip-hop tracks. When it comes to Chief Keef, Travis Scott, and Joey Badass, we're talking about top 50 discographies in hip-hop ever. Chief Keef obviously would not appear on the cover due to a court case back then, but their addition of Chicago Drill's biggest star was so important for the time. And looking back at it, I'm sure they don't regret putting Chief Keef on that list, because today drill is one of the biggest subgenres of rap itself. 2016, arguably the most accurately curated XXL freshman list to ever come out. Almost every single artist on this list is successful in one venture or another in the entertainment industry, and a lot of these artists set the precedent and influenced a majority of underground artists to come. This is a list that clearly means a lot to me because I was in my junior year of high school when it launched, and most of these artists are the most memorable artists I've listened to throughout my lifetime. And what XXL did right this year, as opposed to the other years where they failed, is they were not scared to take a risk on artists that other people were demeaning, degrading, and thought were not the future of rap. XXL so clearly predicted the future of rap with just this 2016 list. There were a lot of older figures and gatekeepers in the hip-hop industry that did not want to see a majority of these artists succeed. This itself would probably be the largest generational gap we saw in rap's history, and XXL was on the right side of history with this one, so shout out to them. Now, after this year, I feel this is where XXL takes its biggest dip, and you see the complete turn on XXL itself. They launched the XXL list as a shot to try something new and give coverage to unheard artists at that time. And that risk, that shot, that strategy expanded their lifespan for about 20 plus years in the industry. But around 2015, we began to see a decline in internet blogs, while simultaneously seeing a rise in independent media sources. Outlets like No Jumper, Say Cheese, DJ Vlad, DJ Academics, Complex, Hot New Hip Hop. Even outlets like The Breakfast Club became the most important interview platform for rappers for a period of time. The industry itself took a turn into individual, and from a lot of these outlets, you were getting faster coverage, you were hearing new news every single day, and where these individual rap critics started to gain a lot of their traction and buzz was the exact way XXL got on years ago, right? They were talking about and giving coverage to artists that were not getting that coverage. No Jumper is the biggest example with the SoundCloud era. He made a career and multi-million-dollar company off the back of underground rap music, which is pretty impressive. And I believe a lot of the negative culture and bad things happening around XXL during this time, during the decline, starts from the top. I believe the top of your company sets the precedent for the culture, energy, and passion throughout the rest of your business. And once being so strong in themselves in the strategy that they were relaying to the fans, XXL no longer had themselves an identity. And at this time, a lot of brands had individual spokespeople coming out to give entertainment to rap listeners about rap music. And the head editor-in-chief of XXL for the last 15 years was a woman by the name of Vanessa Satten. Here's just a few of my favorite, very funny moments and bad takes by Vanessa Satten over the last 10 years. Now, Vanessa Satten is an accomplished journalist in the rap industry. She's been writing for over 20 plus years. And a lot of the biggest critiques against her is basically who creates these XXL lists, who's selecting these artists to become on the cover. And the biggest difference between her and when Elliot Wilson ran XXL is how polarizing they are as people. Vanessa Satten is a very middle-of-the-line person where Elliot Wilson gives his brash critique and sticks to his position. He's not folding back. Really haven't been able to gauge the platform's integrity in where they stand as an outlet. And where that came into play was Famous Dex's domestic violence case, 2016-2017. XXL came outright and took a stance against domestic violence, which props to them. You're advocating for the right things to your audiences. But post making the big announcement of being against Famous Dex, they would have a lot of other artists platformed on the magazine that had similar cases going forward. The biggest examples being X and DaBaby, who was actually involved in a legal murder case that took place in Walmart. So in this case, fans did not like that XXL was picking and choosing which artists they were going to show their favoritism towards, and they just wanted XXL to be true across the board. If you're going to hold one standard for a certain artist, you have to keep that same standard for another. Another issue I guess fans had with XXL was them straight up just lying to the audience. In this clip on The Breakfast Club, within 2 sentences, Angela Yee asked Vanessa Satten, did anybody turn down the XXL list? Her initial gut response is no. 2 sentences later, she mentions that Young M.A. told them that she felt she was too big to be on that year's list. So which one is it? Did nobody turn down the list, or did Young M.A. tell you that she didn't want to be on the list? These small examples of not being able to be transparent would lose their trust amongst their fans and audience of XXL.
Noise.
They're gonna make noise.
Now, I was told this year that Young Thug turned you guys down.
Young Thug agreed to do it, and the night before, around 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, we got a call from I think it was a Cash Money representative. I'm not totally sure because I'd never met him before, and said he couldn't come.
So and then that's why he's not involved.
I guess so.
So someone else, you don't have to say who, got a last-minute call being like, good news, you're in?
No, pretty much we were set up, that he just decided not to come.
But don't you have, isn't it 10?
We were extra this year.
Oh, so you had an extra.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, in all fairness, I did hear there was a legitimate reason for him not coming.
If there was, I wish him the best of luck.
There was a sale at BB. He was getting a skirt.
He was at H&M getting some new...
H&M had a skirt sale.
And the most noise in the past year. That's what it means.
Yeah.
This is why so many people argue about getting on it, and if they don't get on it, it's why so many people get upset.
They cry.
That's like a salute to them.
Right.
Who we have here in our studio today, Tracy G?
Well, we have the one who sits on the throne of the masthead, the head honcho, the editor-in-chief, Vanessa Satten of XXL.
Yes.
And also the music editor, Eric.
Little shit like this, over time, started to devalue what they had to say as critiques in the industry. From 2014 to 2023, there's a long stretch of bad picks and XXL missing on artists that could have been huge in the industry. And them doubling down on taking more money from investors, labels, and not listening to the youth would then come to bite them in the ass today. I would love to see the magazine thrive in the next few years. Having OGs like XXL in the industry provides more value to other up-and-coming media outlets as a whole. What's to come? What is the next thing in rap media? What's the future? And how I believe XXL can come back and actually still launch themselves to be a prominent figure in rap music media.
Free big brother slammer. 2019 got caught with a jammer. New bitch, she don't got no manners. She know I been drinking, come fuck with the scammers. Tim Allen, how I walk with the hammer.